Mushoku Tensei Episode 13, What Did the Anime Skip? So smash that like for Best Girl Roxy, especially since no sponsor today. Definitely watch till the end, or I'm gonna end up on the Japanese streets. Kicking this off with Roxy's point of view. So glad they included this in the anime. You got Roxy thinking back that she hasn't been back to this place, the Demon Continent, in like 15 years. She only just realized how much time had passed since she started envying the humans and fled her village. Roxy was so done with this place that the Demon Continent never crossed her mind. She never stopped to think about her parents or ever coming back. You know, there's already so much juicy stuff about Roxy. Maybe I should do a video about that. Let me know if you want to see that. As for Roxy looking at her blonde elf companion, she was envious of her and she actually wished she had a body like hers. On the flip side, Roxy looked like a plain child. As for the blonde elf info, her full name Elinalise Dragonroad. She's an elf warrior that fights on the front line. Her weapon of choice includes wielding a shield and an escont. An escont is actually not a common weapon among adventurers. The one this blonde wields is actually a magical item that she found from the labyrinth. And it could actually create this wind vacuum that could cut down trees meters away. Likewise, her shield is also a magical item. In other words, the elf is packing. As for the dwarf Talhand, this guy, believe it or not, he's actually a magician. If you're like Roxy, you might be wondering, why is the magician wearing so much armor? Turns out this dude is just slow and not really agile, which means if like a beast is going after him, he can't evade it. So it's really this magician built like a tank. For a notable anime change for these two, from the time that you hear about them in the light novel, you hear about them always fighting, that Roxy has to pull them apart. But then turn to the anime, these guys are already buddy-buddy. Anyway, back to Roxy and some romance thoughts. Unfortunately, it turns out that none of the men that Roxy was ever interested in ever saw her as a woman. She was popular with children, but guys, no luck. As for Roxy thinking about her old party, you got this horse dude, the pig dude, and the blonde. Roxy thought back that there was a high chance that they were already dead. For Roxy, it actually had been 20 years. So who knows, they could be dead or maybe just retired. And get this, I recall my jaw dropping at this reveal. It turns out the horse boy and the pig guy here, you've seen them before. The horse dude here was the one harassing Rudy and his party members for money, while the pig dude was the one that actually got taken out by that giant cobra. For the blonde dude, Roxy did confirm this guy is long gone. Next up, some info about the Wolf Gang, Paul's old party. Zenny's too. It turns out they were actually one of the most famous parties in all of the Central Continent. They were known as a mismatched party, full of members with one or two odd quirks. They quickly got to S rank in a few years, but then disbanded shortly after, which should have been around the time that Zenny's got pregnant. As for Roxy gathering intel, I just love Roxy's surprised face here. She did in fact find out about Dead End. When Roxy was just a kid, her mother used to always threaten her with that name. Dead End is gonna come and steal you away. As for Elinalise gathering info in her own ways, as you might have gotten from the episode, she just loves men. Emphasis on plural. Roxy actually figured that she must have had numerous children by now. The reason she acted like this was supposedly due to this curse that she had placed on her. Although Roxy noticed she didn't look inconvenienced by it. In fact, she seemed to enjoy it. Next up, their group meeting. One of the main topics at hand, the Dead End party. So get this, the Adventurer Guilds actually never listed their names just out of fear. And if there was ever a request to take them out, that would definitely be an S-rank mission, which I think might be underestimating Ruijerd. That guy's like S++. For an anime change or skip here, Blondie over here said that they should invite Dead End over for playtime, which Talhand just spat out in the light novel and said that info's useless. Again, going back to them always fighting in the light novel, not in the anime. Then getting into the heavy topic about the people teleporting. As you've seen from the last few episodes, the Demon Continent was really this place that was hard to survive. Now imagine teleporting here without any proper equipment or anything else. Roxy explained that just surviving a year here for the locals was difficult already. On the bright side, their kingdom would actually cover the cost while searching for the residents of that region. As for Roxy's plan of attack, she wasn't the type of person to linger around and she didn't want to waste any time. Their schedule involved sending the request to the guild on the first day, searching on the second, and then already heading off by the third day. So let's get into it. The second day, Roxy was really overly curious about Dead End. You actually have a new anime scene here with Roxy thinking of Rudy as the kids pass by her, which does complement the new scene from the last episode, Rudy thinking about her. Come on, these two run into each other. As for Rocky Stalker mode, from the little exercise, Roxy noticed that Ruijerd's skills were beyond her level, that perhaps it might be a good idea not to make contact with them at all. and it really got settled what their eyes met. Roxy was freaking terrified. She felt like she was being hunted. On the flip side, for Ruijerd's point of view, make no mistake, he sensed Roxy from the very beginning. He just allowed it. This weird girl was probably just watching out of curiosity. Then for Ruijerd's thoughts on Eris, he did notice her skills were beginning to take shape, that in the future Eris might actually turn into a fine swordswoman. But right now she was still too young, that if her ego inflated too much, it may be a disaster later on. He actually hadn't planned on letting Eris win, not for a while. But unfortunately Roxy distracted him enough to let his guard down. And this is how Eris got a win. Switching back to Roxy, her scared ass running away. In reality, she was actually prepping for a fight. Alright, so let's get into the juicy scene. First off, an anime change here. Elinalise was actually in a different room originally. Roxy could hear her moaning through. Just the sound of it put Roxy in the weird mood. Roxy even had to stop herself. Her right hand was ready to grow downstairs, but she thought there's no time for that. Unlike in the anime, Roxy originally waited it out. I mean, they were doing it for 3+ hours. But still, Roxy waited. Once again, you really got a feel of Roxy holding it in. Roxy had to tell herself that it was not the time to get busy. From their dwarf buddy, she had heard that the blonde did bring men to her room frequently. That she even did this when they were dungeon diving. I guess Paul wasn't enough back in the day. For something I loved, icicle break. More like explosion. At least she didn't blow up the whole building like a certain loli would. As for Roxy and friends heading out, they actually left on the 3rd day, right on schedule. In the anime, you did hear about Roxy's dungeon fantasy. The first time she wanted some love was when she heard how intimate Paul and Zenith were getting with each other. Unlike in the anime, Roxy had actually already tried her plan. But when Roxy went to a labyrinth, her fantasies got shattered into a million pieces. You had people mocking her for looking like a child, and even laughing at her. Roxy even came close to dying a couple of times. You know, she luckily escaped, but she didn't want to repeat that mess again. Sadly, this is going to be the end of Roxy for a while. The lineup actually ended on a bit of a cliffhanger. That Roxy had decided she was best off alone while wandering on the Demon Continent. That this was how Roxy made her first misstep, and began her adventure across the Demon Continent. Dun dun dun. Post below if you do want me to do that Roxy video. Anyway, switching to one lovely fellow starting with the smuggler. As for details about this shady mission, the anime made it seem like it occurred right away, but it actually took place a month from now. In short, this dude was backstabbing his own smuggler group. You know about those slave kids. At this point in time, he said that one of them mixed within them would cause trouble for them in the future. For another time reference, these guys did have to wait another 15 days for some more details about the job. Seems to be a running theme. To actually transport a slave, it would cost 5 green ore coins. Luckily for this mission, Ruijerd came at no extra cost. For a little bit of side world building mentioned later, just know that slaves are very much high in demand, but they are in short supply. Alright, so time to take off. Time-wise, they actually got to the port 3 days later. Rudy was actually a bit surprised that Eris had recognized it. Wasn't this the first time she'd seen the ocean? But fun fact, you saw Rudy building little sculptures and figures with his earth magic. One of these ships was among them. Oh yeah, just know he kept on making and selling those Roxy figures. Rudy is very cultured. As for Rudy's skills at this point, he had been doing some physical training with the other two, but magic-wise, he hadn't really improved at all. As for a skipped anime scene, on the 4th day, there was actually an octopus attack. Ready to fight was an S-rank party of bodyguards. They went by the party name Aqua Road. Rudy had fun judging these guys, that they were weaker than Ghislaine, Ruijerd, and himself. Honestly, he was disappointed. Was this really what an S-rank group looked like? On the other hand, he quickly realized that this was an S-rank party. While this group actually lacked individually, they really made up with it as teamwork. This whole event actually made Rudy realize that they were missing this from their party. Sure, they were all powerful, but honestly, Ruijerd could carry them solo. Teamwork was what Dead End lacked, especially when it came to Eris. Day number 5, the healing magic. It was actually one of the sailors on board that applied healing magic to Eris first. Later that fun switched over to Rudy. For some world info about the boat, or should I say boat ride, there weren't really that many people traveling from the Demon Continent over to the Millis Continent. Perhaps it was due to it being more expensive for demons. Or maybe demons just found it easier living on the Demon Continent. I'd wager a bit of both. As for poor Eris, they actually made her more flashy in the anime. So no surprise, this really got Rudy acting up. The anime skipped this lengthy, girthy passage of Rudy being in the mood, and then conflicted over it. thinking Eris is practically his for the taking. She couldn't resist, so why not just jump into it? That his pulsating dragon was almost like Excalibur at this moment. Why not use this chance to lose his V card? Of course he backed down. He was thinking about his inner Merlin. Resist, my boy, wait until you're 15. Still, Rudy did notice her development. That certain areas for Eris were rapidly developing to resemble her mother. And then there's this that I really can't say out loud. This feels weird to even show on screen. Thankfully, Rudy thought back to how Eris trusted him. She was worried about how his mana would hold out. Eris trusted him that he would never use this opportunity and actually take advantage of her. Ultimately, the conclusion for this was Rudy closing his heart off, which is why you saw him running to the bathroom to tame the dragon. Oh, and that weird smell comment, that was neat for the anime. I gotta say, overall, I'm actually glad how the anime handled this. I've seen constant complaints about Rudy's behavior, but if you think about it, it's been really toned down for the anime, especially when you get into the last part of this episode. Please YouTube, don't take this video down. Anyway, finally getting on land. For an anime change here, anime Eris was still sick here. Compare this to the light novel Eris, where she was back to normal after she got off the boat. And Rudy just couldn't help himself. He actually described his appetite for Eris, that he was like a starving dog with this delicious meaty meal in front of him. Let's just be thankful Eris can't hear his thoughts, because she did give him permission. In the light novel, she did turn really bright red. As a substitute, you do have the manga counterpart. For another anime change here, their mission actually didn't begin until nighttime. While waiting, Rudeus and Eris went over to exchange their money. Their current resources included 3 Millis gold coins, 7 Millis large copper coins, and 2 Millis copper coins. For some important world building skipped, you found out about the rainy season. This was actually a weather phenomenon that took place in the Great Forest. Constant rain that wouldn't stop for 3 whole months. In short, this made travel completely impossible, and this was coming up. As for some info about where they were staying, it was actually a slum lodge. Everywhere else was just too expensive. Recall these guys being fresh off the boat from the Demon Continent, where the currency is valued less. For some fun Eris moment here, in the light novel she wasn't sick, so she actually took this time to do her own laundry. Unfortunately, this also meant skipping another Rudy moment. He had to explain how someone might steal the underwear she just washed. To which Eris fought back that it was only Rudy who would steal something like that. But you know Rudy, he would never try to steal her underwear after she's washed them. What's the point then? To which I was really just getting flashback to my undie vending machine video. Anyway, off to the smuggler area. For an anime change here, Rudy actually left his staff with Eris. For some time info skipped, just know it did take an hour to get over to the place. For some juicy world building skipped here, Rudy was told to keep his mouth shut about it. In case you wonder why they didn't make him sign this blood seal, there were actually some races that didn't have fingerprints. So welcome back, Ruijerd buddy. Hopefully you noticed his hair did grow back. At least this was some indication in the anime that a week had passed. So getting into the kid topic, here's an anime change. In the light novel, Ruijerd mentioned there were 7 kids. Now compare this to the anime, they mentioned 6 kids, 1 which died, so there were 5 left. So let's have a quiet moment for the one sacrifice added for the anime people. For them ultimately deciding to take everyone out, you did have a Rudy skip line here. Just don't leave a single one alive. Which was essentially Rudy double checking they wouldn't come after them. Then for a juicy bit skipped here, you did originally have Rudy conflicted over killing. Over the past year, Rudy had never killed anyone. There was no reason to, he didn't have this impulse to kill anyone. Still, Rudy wasn't naive, he understood how this world worked. Eventually, he would have to come to the point where he would have to kill someone. But up until this point, he didn't want to commit the taboo of murder. Now switch this back to the anime. Now with seeing the kid die, it really just made this a black and white issue. So let there be carnage. At the same time, I will just point out, with the kid getting off, I just couldn't see Ruijerd not hulking out as soon as possible. Switching over to the kitties. Originally these guys didn't have anything but the fur on their back. I'll just say that the manga actually shows you them less covered up if you're into that. For a Rudy moment the anime skipped, Rudy was getting super excited over real animal grows. Could this be heaven? Given the situation, I was so glad this wasn't included. For something else changed up, just note that these kitties were worse off in the light novel. They were beaten, they had bones busted, but not abused in certain other ways. I would wager mostly due to monetary reasons. And then for this moment, Rudy enjoying healing them. Honestly, I borderline felt like hurling at the way that was described in the light novel. Mr. Flawed Rudy indeed. I really do have a feeling a lot of this wouldn't be included if it was written today, or at least this being drastically toned down. Anyway, for the girl speaking here, this is a new language. The Beast God Tongue, which thankfully Rudy learned pre-teleportation. I just love how the anime actually made up languages for this. Along with taking out everyone, apparently in the anime, Ruijerd also had time to shave his head. Let me just predict the Blu-ray fix right now. Getting into another anime skip. They didn't burn the bodies, which originally it was Rudy doing it. Not really to hide the evidence, but the blood would attract monsters. For some fun skipped, Rudy actually considered blaming this attack on someone else. Why not blame it on the great Emperor Kishirika? I mean, she did say to rely on her if they needed anything. Switching over to that barrier, here's some world building info. The barrier was actually a type of healing magic, something that Rudy wasn't familiar with. The light coming from it meant that there had to be a fuel source. Roxy had taught him that if you remove the source, it'll disappear, which is a known method to removing magical traps. For another quick anime change, they actually placed that magical crystal right above. Originally this was upstairs. Then for the big happy fluff, an anime change here. Originally the dog looked menacing at Rudy. According to Rudy, animals had never liked him. Wonder why? They could probably smell it on you. But then Rudy tried to speak in the beast's God tongue, which actually helped to quiet down, so it did understand him. Then for that misunderstanding, that beast screech. I just love the comparison Rudy made to Eris shouting. The sound felt like it had a mass. His brain trembled. Just know that Rudy getting frozen does get expended a little bit later, but for now just know, Rudy was trying to heal himself, but he couldn't move his hands. So have fun, Rudy, don't drop the bone. So if you did enjoy this, smash that like. I did go ahead and work on this till 4 AM, but it still got up later than I wanted. You could thank the random construction that started next door, just pushing off when I could actually record audio. But still, I'm aiming to be within the 48 hours of the episode dropping. And a few quick things. I am thinking about doing some quick single topic videos on other things like the 1 year time skip maybe. It might be mostly audio only and stills, maybe on Friday. Let me know if you will like that. And from last time, some of you got it. Definitely not a Death Note reference last video. So keep on posting, I do read all the comments. And it seemed like almost everyone did like this format, so sticking with it. And I don't want to, but I might have to use more stills just to avoid the video taken down. We'll see. And I definitely do recommend the light novel. You could go ahead and find the light novel and manga over on Bookwalker. Just use my code Foxen to get a sweet $5 discount. I do highly recommend it. This light novel is so jam-packed, it's some of the most fun I've had since reading Essay of Progressive. If I didn't have things to do, I would read maybe 1, maybe even 2 in a day. But anyway, bonus question, Eris or Roxy? Help me out, I'm not sure which figure to get. Definitely check out the last episode breakdown and my Rudy adventure in Japan. Subscribe so you don't miss the next video, and I'll see you guys later.